Welcome to Joy Recovery Radio. In this space, we talk about betrayal, recovery, and relational harm through the lens of integrity, accountability, and trauma-informed care. Our goal is not to rush healing or prescribe outcomes, but to offer language, clarity, and grounded perspective. This podcast is educational. You're invited to listen slowly, take what resonates, and leave the rest. Let's begin.
After disclosure, one of the most common things a betrayed partner says, sometimes within hours or within days, is some version of this. Everyone is going to think that I'm crazy. And she says that because she knows what's about to happen. She knows that when this comes out, the people who have spent the last 20 years watching her husband at church, at work, at the soccer games, family Thanksgiving dinner, those people are going to look at her with something between disbelief and pity. Some of them are actually going to take his side. They may not say that out loud, because the man they have known for 20 years cannot possibly have done what she is saying he did. And I want to tell you something. As one of the men who caused harm, the reason she knows that is going to happen is because she has been living for years alongside the most carefully maintained product that you ever built. The version of you that everyone else sees. That product has a name. The name is image management. That's what we're going to talk about today. It's one of the most stable, most rewarded, most reinforced patterns men in betrayal recovery carry. It's also one of the hardest things to dismantle because the world has been applauding it your entire adult life. This is Joy Recovery Radio. I'm Roy.
And I'm Jacqueline. And I'm here today and I'm partnering with Roy on this episode because we're going to be talking about the harm that image management does and what it causes to both sides. So I'll be coming in just at specific moments to name experiences from a betrayed partner perspective. To the betrayed partners listening, there are several nuggets in here that is going to explain what is happening to you.
Today we're going to look at the visible half of a hidden life and at what it cost the woman who's been living next to it without knowing it was there. In our last episode, if you heard us talk about compartmentalization, you might be wondering, why are we giving image management its own episode? Compartmentalization is the architecture of the hidden life. It's the secret basement. It's where you become someone other people wouldn't even recognize. Image management is the architecture of the visible life. So compartmentalization is downstairs, the secret basement. Image management is upstairs. One is hidden, one is visible. Image management is the version of you that walks into the office, attends church, goes into the gym, goes to the family gathering, gets recognized as a particular kind of person. Image management protects the public reputation. The reason this matters is that men in recovery sometimes think, okay, I disclosed the basement. The basement is now gone. Problem solved. But the upstairs is still there. And the performance upstairs is still running. So let's look at a working definition. What do we mean by image management? Image management is the deliberate, sustained construction of a version of yourself that is designed to create specific perceptions in other people and the active maintenance of that version over time. So let's look at two parts of that definition. First, it is designed. Image management is not just being polite or putting your best foot forward. It is the careful selection in real time of which words to use, which facial expressions to deploy, which opinions should I share, which weaknesses do I admit to, which strengths do I display, all with the goal of producing a particular impression in the person who's in front of you. Second, it's divergent from your internal reality. Image management becomes clinically significant when the gap between what you are presenting and what is actually true about you is not some small social gap, but it is a sustained structural gap. When the man other people think you are is not the man you actually are. And you're doing active work to maintain that difference. I want to distinguish this from what could be called healthy social presentation. You're the same person at home and you're the same person in public, but you adjust your tone and content to the context you're in. You speak more carefully at work than you do at the dinner table, for example. You don't wear the same clothes to a funeral that you do to a barbecue. That's healthy social presentation. You show different facets of yourself to different people. That's normal. That's part of being a competent adult. That's not image management. Image management is when the version of you in public is carefully constructed, maintained, calibrated, defended. Most men running an active image management pattern have different versions of themselves. There's the boss version, the friend version, the husband version, the church version, the version my mom knows, the version my college buddies remember. And each of those versions of me is maintained over time. Each of them has an active persona. Here's the part that most men don't realize until they actually look. The active maintenance of all of those personas is exhausting. One of the reasons men feel relief when they go into the secret basement is sometimes not just because of the acting out behavior. It's because the basement is one of the few places where the image management work stops, where they don't have to be performing. That relief is one of the engines of compartmentalization. The basement can become the only place where the man feels like he's not putting on a show anymore, which means image management upstairs is part of what creates the demand for the basement downstairs. It's important that you understand that linkage because it tells you that dismantling the basement without dismantling the image management is unstable work. That basement was, in part, a response to a life of performance. If the performance keeps running upstairs, the demand for some kind of off-stage place, such as a basement, is going to keep returning. Maybe in a different form, maybe in a smaller way, but the demand is still going to be there. So let's identify some patterns. We want to talk about 5 common image management profiles that we see in men working this framework. Most men, if you listen to these 5, you're going to find that you have a primary profile, but if you pay attention, you'll probably find there's a secondary, maybe even a third. So as I describe these 5 faces that many of us men take on and maintain as an image, I want you to notice which one do you recognize first? Which one do you recognize second? Maybe even a third one. Because the second one and the third one, that is more diagnostic. The first one you probably already see in yourself. It's that second and that third one that might still be running and you're not even conscious of it. The first persona, It's what we're going to call the good guy. This is the man whose image is built around being kind. He's helpful. He's reliable. He's the one everyone says nice things about. He's always available. He's always thoughtful. He always remembers your birthday. But underneath that persona, usually, is a man who is terrified of being disliked. He has learned over his lifetime that performing kindness produces approval from others, and that approval makes him feel safe. The good guy persona, it's real in the sense that he genuinely does kind things for people. But the persona is fictional in the sense that the kindness is calibrated for the response it produces. It's not coming from a settled internal disposition in him. The good guy persona is one of the most defended profiles because everyone in the man's life is telling him in 1,000 ways every week that this version of him is worth maintaining. So when he thinks about dismantling this persona, it feels like to him he's getting rid of his actual goodness. But that's actually not true. You aren't dismantling the goodness. You're dismantling the performance. If the goodness was real, it's still going to be there underneath everything. The second persona that we see when men are practicing image management is the capable man. This is the man whose image is built around competence, achievement. He's steady. He's the one who has it all together. He's the one who can be counted on. He's the provider. He's the fixer. He's the high performer. Underneath the capable man persona is often a man who has learned that being competent is the only acceptable form of being. His vulnerability, his dependency, his fear, his limitation, that's never been welcome ever since childhood. The persona is real in the sense that he genuinely is competent, but the persona is fake in the sense that competence has become the entire bandwidth of who he's allowed to be. This persona often produces men who don't know how to be helped. They don't know how to admit that they can't do something. So the basement for these men, it becomes one of the few places where the demand for competence drops away, which is one of the reasons he goes there. The third persona, we'll call this one the spiritual man. This is the man whose image is built around faith, character, virtue. This is the pastor. This is the deacon. This is the Bible study leader. This is the man who faithfully serves at church. This is the man at work who's known for his integrity. The man whose moral seriousness is his social currency. I want to be really careful with this one because this was one of the main ones I had. As a seminary-trained theologian, as a pastor, I certainly have nothing against authentic faith. And the issue is not the spiritual content. The issue is the image management. When the spiritual identity becomes this curated persona, when other people's perception of the man's holiness is something that he is actively maintaining and producing, then his spiritual life has been weaponized as an image. This persona is among the most damaging when it collapses, because the gap between the public spiritual man and the private behavior produces a particular kind of devastation in the people who trusted him. This persona also makes recovery uniquely complicated because the man's relationship to his own spirituality now has to be untangled from the performance that ran on top of it, usually for years. Next is the easygoing man. This is the man whose image is built around being chill. He's laid back. He's the one who never gets worked up. He's easy to be around. He never makes a fuss. There's no drama with this guy. Underneath this persona, usually, is a man who has learned that being seen as having a strong inner reality, preferences, opinions, anger, needs, those things are dangerous. So he flattens them out. He smooths them over. He just goes along with everyone. He becomes compliant. He becomes pleasant company at the cost of being a discernible person. This persona is the most invisible image management pattern out of all 5. It does not look like performance because it's the absence of a conspicuous self. But the absence is calibrated. It's measured. It's intentional. The man is actively suppressing his internal life to produce the impression of someone who is uncomplicated, anxious-free, and drama-free.
Partners married to the easygoing man often describe, especially after disclosure, a strange, familiar feeling of having lived with someone that they could never quite locate or understand. He's pleasant, he's agreeable, he went along with things, he didn't fight, he didn't argue, it was just pretty chill. But much later, we realize that he also didn't show up as an authentic or identifiable person. So yes, he existed, but his ability to be vulnerable did not. See, vulnerability and transparency is typically the missing link that comes to most of us that we did not catch until the basement was discovered. So now that the basement has been revealed, the part of him that he covered up for so long is exposed. The side of him that we thought didn't exist, so the dark side, is alive and it's active. If you're a partner and you're listening and that description matches your experience, I want you to know that what you sensed for many years was accurate. The unease that you couldn't name, his lack of being vulnerable or authentic, or just the feeling that you were married to a kind, friendly man, but something felt absent. Now you experience the difficulty of saying who he really is to others, because this kind man that he portrayed himself to be, there's nothing visible to point out to who he really is behind closed doors. That's a very real experience that we live with.
The 5th and final persona is the respected man. This is the man whose image is built around earning regard, status, recognition, position. The man whose social architecture is organized around being seen as someone who matters. Now, underneath that persona, often, is a man whose sense of his own worth is dependent on visible markers: the title, the salary, the square footage of his home, the car he drives, the reputation. The persona is maintained because letting it slip would feel like no longer existing. This persona produces men who experience disclosure as a kind of social death. These men in early recovery are often more focused on protecting their public standing than on attending to the betrayed partner's reality. It is one of the more difficult personas to dismantle because the entire infrastructure of the man's self-concept is wired to public reputation. Now, I want to say one more thing about these profiles, these personas, before we move on. Notice, none of these are bad qualities at the root. We're talking about kindness, competence, faith, easygoing, respect. All of those things in their unmanaged form, these are good qualities. The problem is not the quality. Problem is the performance, the management, the construction, the maintenance, the calibration. Dismantling image management is not about becoming unkind or incompetent or faithless or difficult or disrespected. That's not what we're talking about. It's about becoming a man whose kindness and competence and faith, whichever one he genuinely has, arise from a settled internal reality. It's not showing up because of performance.
Do you want to go deeper with teaching like what you're hearing today? That's why we created the Joy Recovery Academy. The Academy is our flagship educational space, designed to help you make sense of betrayal trauma, integrity abuse, and what real recovery actually looks like. This is where clarity replaces confusion and where you finally get a map before anyone tells you where to go. The Academy includes live teaching twice a week, a growing on-demand library, and hundreds of the same tools we use with our private coaching clients. Right now, you can get the first 7 days free, so you can check it out and see if it is what you're looking for. Go to joy-recovery.com, click Academy, and join us today.
Now let me talk about what image management actually does to the woman who is living next to it, because this is the part most men have never really thought about. For this section, I'm going to hand the microphone mainly to Jacqueline, because she has lived this.
Thank you, Roy. So number one, what image management does to the partner who lives with it. So first of all, it isolates her when she's in a crowded room. And I'll give you an example. When you've spent 20 years building this public version of yourself, the likable guy, you've spent years building this version of your wife and your family that everyone admires, it can become so isolating, especially when she's the only person who sees the gap between the persona and the reality that you've created. Or, to be more precise, she's the only person who senses that there is a gap. Even if she can't name what it is, she feels it. And here's what that produces. Every time she's in a room with you and the people who admire you, she is alone with information they do not have. Sometimes she does not even fully have it herself. But she has this felt sense that the version of you everyone is responding to isn't quite the version that she lives with. And that felt sense has nowhere to go. She can't say it out loud because she doesn't have evidence yet. She cannot trust it because everyone else is acting like everything's fine, so she suppresses it year after year. But there is this missing link that continues to come up for her. That suppression is one of the slow injuries that produces what we call the second brain erosion. Her gut keeps telling her something is off. The whole social environment keeps overriding her gut. After enough years, the gut stops talking. We've overruled it. So partners listening, if you've ever sat in a room full of people who were telling you that your husband is wonderful, while your body was telling you something different and you couldn't figure out what that was or how to trust it, that experience is what I'm describing. It is the architecture that he has created that works at eroding your second brain. Number two, it turns her into the difficult one. This is one of the most insidious effects of image management, and one that men most need to understand. So when your husband is the admired man and you have any complaints about him, the social system around you interprets your complaint as you're the problem, not his behavior. Because the public version of him is so well maintained and he's so mannered. So any negative feedback from you runs into a wall of social evidence in his favor. You tell a friend that he's been emotionally absent, and the friend says, "Really? He seems so engaged whenever I see him." You tell your family that he's been controlling, and the family says, "That doesn't sound like him at all." You tell your pastor that he's been deceptive, and the pastor says, "But he served so faithfully here." Each of those responses on its own is just a friendly defense. Over years, those responses form a wall, and the wall functions to keep you on the inside, alone with your perceptions. So he's protected by the persona that he spent 20 years building. That wall does not just isolate you, it actively reframes you in the eyes of people around you as being the unreasonable one, the dramatic one, the one who starts conflict, the nagging one, the defensive one. You are the problem. You are the one with the issues. Because the alternative, that the man everyone admires has actually been hurting you, is something that most people in your social environment are not willing to entertain. They're blind to it, and it doesn't matter what you say, they're not going to hear it. So image management enlists every person in his social work as reinforcement of your isolation. And that is so devastating and difficult to overcome. It's a voice silencer. Number 3, it makes the disclosure itself a second crisis. And here's why. When the basement comes out, you do not just have to deal with the harm. You have to deal with the social fallout of disclosing a man who has spent decades being admired. If you tell people, you have to watch their faces. You have to manage the disbelief. You have to absorb the family members who quietly take his side. You have to handle the church that does not know what to do with you. You have to lose friendships that were built on the foundation of the couple image that you both maintained. And here's one of the hardest parts. You have to often do this all while he's still in early phases of recovery, which means that he's probably still running some version of image management even now. In addition to that, you're also seeing behaviors that you've not been exposed to before. He might also be in front of his pastor talking about how serious he's taking his healing. And he may be in front of his friends talking about the work that he's doing. You can hear it. You can see it. You are in the room watching him do it in real time. A more refined version of the same thing that produced the harm. And so our voice is so silent because we don't know what to say. And sometimes we're afraid to say anything because of the judgment and the wrath we're going to feel. And that is the consequence of this image management.
Thank you for sharing the perspective of the partner. And I want to come back to the men, and I want to level with you men. Most men over time, they can dismantle the basement. But image management is much harder, significantly harder to dismantle. And I want to explain why. There's 3 main reasons. This is what you're going to come up against when you try to do this work. Number 1, it's been working for you your whole adult life. The basement is something that you built, and the image management came right along with it. Probably started in your childhood or adolescence. By the time you got married, the image was already a fully developed persona. By the time you got into recovery, it may have had decades of reinforcement behind it. Every promotion that you received at work, every relationship that you built, every time someone said yes to something that you were offering, image management was part of the engine that produced those outcomes for you. The system was rewarding. Asking a man to dismantle his image management is asking him to dismantle one of the structures that his successes were built on. Second reason that dismantling image management is so difficult is other people may not want you to dismantle it. This is the part maybe you haven't anticipated about this. When you start dismantling your image management, you start letting go of the personas that you've been juggling. Some people in your life will push back. Often they won't even realize that they're doing it, but they're going to do it. They've been receiving a particular persona from you for a long time now, and they like that version. They've built their understanding of you around that persona. When you start showing up differently, more authentically, less curated, less impressive, less performative, less fake, some of them are going to pressure you to bring back the old version. They're going to compliment the old behavior. They will be awkward around the new you. They're going to find the new version of you is more difficult for them. And that pressure is real. It's one of the reasons image management is so hard to dismantle. You're not just dismantling something that is inside of you. You are actually renegotiating slowly the terms on which every person in your social world relates to you. Now, the third reason this is difficult is that the replacement doesn't have a clear template. When it comes to compartmentalization, the replacement is really clear. No basement, no double life, no dual realities, no Jekyll Hyde existence. Everything is integrated across your context. We can describe what the dismantled state of compartmentalization looks like. But with image management, the replacement is harder to picture. What does it look like to be a man who's not running a fake persona? What does it sound like? What does it feel like inside when nothing is being performed anymore? You're just authentic. Most men have never experienced that state, or at least not for any sustained period of time. They don't know what they're aiming for. They have to discover it slowly through trial and error in real time while still functioning in the social environments that reward the old persona. So there's a lot of uncertainty there, and that uncertainty is uncomfortable. Many men try to short circuit that discomfort by adopting a whole new persona, what I call the recovery man. But instead of doing the harder work of letting go of all the other personas, now there's just a new persona that's taken its place.
So before you tell your part, I want to set some framework because I think that it's really important. What you're about to hear is one man's specific experience of dismantling. This is not a checklist item. It is not something to extract and run as your own program. The reason it's being shared at all is so some of you in your own work have an example. And hearing how one man handled his dismantling is often useful.
So there's two principles that need to be in place before any version of what you're about to hear me describe is appropriate for you. The first is that the work below, underneath, has to be in motion. Actual integrity work. The second is that any disclosure to people outside of the marriage has to happen with the partner's full knowledge, full agreement, and full authority over both the content and the timing.
100%. Both of those were very true in our case.
It was a decision, a mutual decision. It wasn't a Roy decision.
Absolutely. I wanted to know what was being said, when it was being said, how it was being delivered, when it was being delivered.
Yeah. So what I'm going to describe is, it's our story. But there was explicit agreement between Jacqueline and I before any of this was set in motion. So don't go plug and play. This
Please.
isn't a template for you to go to without the full participation, blessing, and agreement with your partner. What I'm talking about is doing something similar to a step 9, doing amends, and having those conversations with people that are outside of the marriage. If you're going to do that, you've got to have your partner be sovereign over who is told, what is said, and when. Without that, if you just start telling everybody everything in your life, that will look like dismantling, but it's actually another form of harm to your partner.
If you're a partner listening and your husband has been talking about wanting to do something like this, your authority over who, what, and when is a non negotiable. Saying no, or not yet, or not them is appropriate at any stage of this work.
Okay, here's what happened in my own image management work and why I'm sharing it. Sometime into my own recovery, after the immediate work of integrity had been stabilized, I came to a question I did not initially have preparation for. The question was something like this. The image management was still active, not with Jacqueline. She knew the truth. And she had been seeing the actual me, the authentic me, for a while. But with the rest of the people in my life, my kids, my parents, my siblings, my closest friends, extended family, the persona was still in place. They still thought I was the man that I had been pretending to be for decades. They did not know I had been living a different life underneath. And what I noticed, and this is the critical piece, this is the part I want you to listen to. I noticed that being around them felt different than being around Jacqueline.
Mm.
Around Jacqueline, I was myself. Around them, I was still managing. I was still performing the version of me that they had always known. So the image management machine was still firing, even though the underlying acting out behavior was long gone. So I brought this to Jacqueline. I want to underline that. I didn't act on it. I brought it to her. The conversation we had was not about what I was going to do. It was about whether anything should be done at all. Was this appropriate? Is the timing right? Did it serve her? Not did it just serve me? She and I talked about it more than once, about a question that turned out to be central. Who, if anyone, needed to know? And what exactly did they need to know? Not for their sake, but for the sake of dismantling what was still running inside of me, image management. And we landed somewhere together. There was a circle of people, about 20 of them in the end, who had been close enough to me for long enough that the gap between the man they thought they knew and the man I actually was had become its own structural problem. This was family of origin. This was our children. This was a few close friends. These included people whose ongoing relationship with the persona was, every time I saw them, reinforcing the architecture that I was trying to tear down. Jacqueline was on board with every person on the list. We talked through every person before I had any conversation. She had total veto power the entire time. She also had clarity about what I would say and what I would not say because I wrote it down in the form of a letter.
Yes.
The conversations would not include unnecessary graphic details. There's no point in that. That's not helpful. The point was the dismantling of an image, and the image was the part that belonged to me. So here's roughly what I said in those conversations. I would adjust the words depending upon the person so that it was appropriate for each relationship, but the substance was consistent. I would tell them that for years, I had been presenting a version of myself to them that was not the actual version, that I had been living a life that did not match my stated values. I had been carrying deception inside the relationship that we had, and they had been receiving a curated version of me, and they didn't know it. I would name in appropriate detail that the deception had involved behaviors. I was not going to walk them through, but that those behaviors had been serious and they had caused real harm to Jacqueline. I would tell them that Jacqueline was aware of everything, that we were doing real work together, and that she knew I was having this conversation with them, and
Mhm.
she had agreed to it. Then I would tell them what I was actually asking of them. I was not asking for forgiveness. I wasn't asking them to keep my secret or to take my side against Jacqueline. I was asking them going forward to be able to know the actual me, so that from this day on, the relationship between us would no longer be a relationship between them and a persona that I was still running. The reason I'm telling you is that those conversations did something inside of me that I had not anticipated. Over the course of weeks and months, as I worked through all 20 some odd people on my list, it felt like the slow dismantling of a structure that I had not realized was still bearing the weight of my social life. After each conversation, something specific happened inside of me. The next time I saw that person, I didn't feel the need to perform anymore. That old system that would fire around them, the management of how I was being seen by them, that was gone. Why? Because the conditions that required it were no longer there. They knew the real me. And I knew that they knew. There was nothing left to manage. They knew the truth. They knew the real Roy. Over time, as the conversations accumulated with more and more people, the image management machine had fewer and fewer rooms to operate in. As each relationship moved out from under the persona and into the truth, the persona itself lost structural integrity. That architecture lost the conditions that allowed it to stand inside of me. And I want to say one more thing. I'm sharing this because some of you will hear this and you'll build a list and you'll start calling people today. If you do that before the integrity foundation is in place, and if you do that without your wife's authority over the process, you are not dismantling your image management. You will be running a new version of it. I am Recovery Man. That's your new persona. And you're using your social network and your relationships as the audience. That is not what I did, and that would be harmful to your partner. So what does the actual work look like when it comes to dismantling image management? The personal section that Jacqueline and I just shared with you is one piece of evidence of dismantling, but it's not the whole thing. And instead of giving you steps, I want to give you conditions. These conditions have to be true continuously for the work to be real of collapsing image management in your life. The first move is to name what your persona actually is. Is it one of the 5 that we talked about? In specific terms, what was it? What was the version of yourself that you were maintaining? What were its features? What did it produce for you? What was it protecting you from? This sounds easy. This is actually harder than it sounds. Most men have run their image for so long, they don't even see it. They just feel like they're being themselves. So this exercise of naming your persona requires you to step outside of it long enough to see it as a manufactured thing, that it's not authentic. And often this is the first time men have ever done anything like this in their life. Here's why it's so critical. If you can't name your persona, you cannot dismantle it. You can only modify it. And when you modify an image management persona without dismantling it, it just produces a refined version of that same persona. That's what pseudo recovery looks like. The second condition is the slow practice of letting specific people see you in moments where you're no longer managing your image. Now, we're not talking about your entire social landscape all at once. That would be overwhelming, and it would be its own kind of theater. We're talking about specific people, a few of them. People who are safe enough that the experiment can run. It can be your coach, a trusted brother in recovery, a men's group, your sponsor, your therapist. The practice is to let those people see the parts of you that the persona would usually hide, like your fear, your shame, your worries, your confusion, your anxiety, your doubts. The parts that the persona was always covering. And you let those parts be seen without trying to package them or frame them or spin them into the next persona. That is genuinely uncomfortable work, man. Every instinct you have built over decades will be telling you to shape what you are showing. Continue to manage that perception that others have of you. The true discipline is to notice that instinct and to let it pass without acting on it. Keep doing this over time with more and more people until being unmanaged, being authentic in a few specific relationships becomes something that you can actually inhabit and do without performing. The third condition, you got to be able to tolerate the social cost without compensating for it. This is the condition that most men quit on. This is the one that hurts most directly. Because here's what's going to happen. As you dismantle your image management, some of the social rewards that came with the old version of you are going to go away. People are going to stop responding to you the way they used to respond to you. Some relationships are going to go pretty cold. Some opportunities will not come. Some of the respect that you're used to will diminish, at least at first, while the new version of you is finding its voice. The instinct, when that happens, is to compensate, to work harder, to re-perform, to find a new persona that recovers the respect or the reward that I feel like I'm losing. That instinct is the old system. It's trying to restart. The discipline is to let the social cost happen, to absorb it without trying to recoup it, to recognize that the reward that you were receiving was being paid to a persona, not to you, and that the loss of that regard is not a loss of something that's actually real. Some of the regard you will lose and you won't get it back. Some of it you will get back and it'll be different because it's paid to the authentic you by people who are seeing you accurately for the first time. The man who is admired for who he actually is can actually accept that admiration. The man who is admired for his persona, he can't, because the persona has to keep running. I want to close this episode with one assignment for the men. Here's the assignment. Sit down this week and write a description of your primary persona. Specifically, the version of yourself that other people have been admiring for years. What are his features? What does it sound like? What does that persona value publicly? What kinds of statements does that persona make? What kind of opinions does that persona offer? What does that persona never admit? And then I want you to write a second column on your paper and ask these questions in that column. What does that persona cost you to maintain? Does it cost you energy, time, honesty, integrity? congruence? What were you doing in your life, and where were you going to find relief from the maintenance of that persona? And then I want you to sit with the gap between the two columns. The gap between the man who runs the persona and the man you would be if you were not running it. That gap is the work. That is the territory of dismantling. And the size of that gap tells you how much there is to do.
Before we close, I want to leave the partners listening with a few things. So, Rory making an amends to friends and family absolved me from having to be the secret keeper. And that was so freeing because I no longer had to pretend we were living our best life and that our relationship was perfect. I was freed from having to carry the weight of maintaining the image that we wanted people to see. Whether we realize it or not, it's emotionally, psychologically, mentally, spiritually, and physically exhausting to have to live a lie. It was eroding my own self-respect, and I began to build immense resentment towards Rory for having to keep face for him. In addition to that, our friends and family respect our boundaries. If we tell them, no, we can't see that, or we can't go to this place, they understand. We don't have to explain ourselves. They don't think that I'm controlling.
Hmm.
That's a big one, I think,
Yeah.
betrayed partners face is when the accountability tools, maybe there's accountability software or cameras or GPS monitoring or whatever. There's always backlash on the betrayed partner for being controlling. I don't have to carry that backlash.
So the relationships with those 22 in particular today is categorically different than it was. And I would call it better, healthier, because it's built on authenticity.
I would agree. It's not built on a facade, and I don't feel like I am compromising my personal integrity or having to pretend to be something that I'm not. And that has been really freeing for me.
Well, this was Joy Recovery Radio. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Roy.
And I'm Jacqueline. And we want to remind everyone that joy is possible
When you live in integrity. We'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening to Joy Recovery Radio. If today's episode was helpful, you can find additional educational resources and information about the Joy Recovery Academy and our private coaching at joy-recovery.com. Remember, joy is possible when you live in integrity.